Hey there, YouTube. Thank you for stopping in. So we're going to actually just hop right into it so that this doesn't have to be a very long video, okay? This is part 2 of the series, and this video is going to be covering substrates. So if you watched part 1, you should already know what tank size options you have. You probably have a favorite option if you've gone out and looked at them like I suggested you do. And so you should know the dimensions of your tank, the footprint, and you should have narrowed down the species that you want to put inside of it. Now we have to select what substrate's going in there. Hi guys. They want me to feed them. I'll feed them after I do this video. So for substrate, the best thing you can do now is go a little bit deeper into the research on your species. If they prefer sand, get sand. If they prefer gravel, get gravel. I personally prefer natural color schemes. I don't like having a lot of extra dyes and things like that if I can avoid it. So for sand, my personal preference is actually pool filter sand. It's super cheap. You can get a 50-pound bag for less than 10 bucks. Other people also will use play sand and things like that. You're definitely going to want to rinse and rinse and rinse. My method is to just take a bucket, put a 5-gallon like Lowe's Home Depot style bucket, fill it about 1/3 to halfway with sand, and then run it under my sink in the basement, my utility sink, with some warm water so my hand doesn't get cold. And I literally just dig my hand in there and scoop and dig and scoop and dig and scoop, and just brown will come up. All the small, fine little powder pieces from all the little particulates rubbing together, all the little powder will start coming out. And I do that so that all of that shit doesn't end up in the tank, the filtration on top and inside of things. God knows, it's going to go everywhere. Especially as you're adding things, especially if a fish buries itself or anything stirs up the substrate. As you're planting, all of that stuff will start creating a cloudy environment. We don't want that. The same is true for gravel. Gravel will be a little bit more rough on the hands, so it might be a good idea to put like a nice thick dishwashing glove on, one that's brand new and hasn't had soap or chemicals on it. You're going to stir it and pour it out, stir it and pour it out, stir it and pour it out. Keep the water running in it while you're stirring it and then pour it out. Just whatever method you seem to find that works for you. And you're going to keep doing that until it's coming out as clear as you can manage. It's going to take a lot of rinses. This is going to be probably one of the hardest labors of the tank setup process, is going to be washing your substrates. So you do not use chemicals, just water. Either way you cut it, that's what you do, unless you have something like a live soil. I'm not going to go into great detail about that, but essentially we're just going to cover sand versus gravel. But with sand, there's a bunch of different options. There's more powdery sands, there's coarser sands. There's some that will change your pH, like aragonite. Some people use different materials that are ground down, like crushed coral and things like that. But we're just going to talk about sand in a general sense, and we're going to talk about gravel in a general sense, of which there's colors and all sorts of different stuff. Plants can be grown in either, but it might be a little bit more of a challenge for you to grow them in sands. That being said, you should go with what species of fish you're going in there prefer. So if your species of fish prefer a sand environment, come from a sand environment, have a tendency to swim into it when they're scared or hide, all of those little pages on the fish that you're going to put in there are going to tell you that if that's true. If any of the fish that you have would prefer a sandy environment, just go all sands. The other people will be just fine inside of a sand environment. It's not going to phase them. But somebody who needs or prefers sand being in a gravel environment, that will affect them. So in that event, if you're trying to do a planted environment, just be sure you use root tabs and be aware that there will be a little bit more challenge keeping plants from floating up. As you can see, I've got little stones in here to kind of help get these guys started. Until the roots reach out under there and get themselves a big enough platform, that sand won't hold them down. They'll just kind of string up through the sand. Whereas with gravel, the compression between the heavier pieces causes it to hold the root systems down a little bit better. As far as cleaning is concerned, cleaning's super easy. With sand, you clean all of it at the same time. You don't dig into it and go nuts like you would in gravel to suck things through it. because gravel's more coarse, things sink down in there. With sand, things tend to rest on the surface, so as you're doing your water changes, normally what I'll do is I'll take a little piece of tubing, like clear tubing, I'll sleeve it into a piece of rigid tubing, and I go in there and I grab all the little pieces. When I'm done with that, every so often I will put the piece of tubing back in there without any kind of suction going, and I just give the surface of the sand a light little stir. And that's just to prevent any issues with the sand that can come from organic breakdown and gas buildup in the sand. Normally, not an issue unless you're like a few inches of soil, let's say 2 fingers. If you're at like above 2 fingers. If you're below that, like, you know, 1 finger above like your frame line or something like that, chances are you're not going to have any buildup like that, but it's still not a bad idea to give it a stir once in a while. Gravel, you don't have to worry about stirring. If there's any organic buildup in there, it's going to off-gas right through immediately. It won't build up. You won't have to worry about it. But you do have to clean it differently. You do have to sink a tube in there and pull a bunch of the gunk out of there, because all of the gunk is going to go into the substrate rather than on top of it. One thing I will tell you, I wouldn't recommend cleaning it all as far as like all at once. Like I said up there, I would do a half to a quarter of the tank a week, and develop a system, whatever works best for your tank. We'll talk more about that stuff down the road, but the cleaning is different, planting is a little bit different. Just go with what your fish prefer. As far as colors, do what you want, but I would suggest a more natural environment. But hey, look, if this is for kids or something like that, just be sure you rinse whatever you have very, very well so that you're not sending a bunch of dyes into the tank. And if, when you put that in there, it gets a little bit cloudy at first, don't panic. That tends to happen, especially with new people. You're probably going to underestimate how much rinsing you actually have to do. And it's really the hardest part about the tank setup is getting all the substrate ready, because the rinsing is incredible. But don't panic. Once your filters are running and everything like that, it'll clear it up. And if it's kind of bad, you can get something like that filter fiber. If you have a hob or something like that, we'll talk about type of filtration down the road, but you would add something like that, a much finer material to it, and it'll pull all of that gunk out. So I'm going to edit this little video down. It's at 8 minutes right now. We'll see what it actually comes to in the end. Any questions, post them below. Like I said, this is going to be a general discussion. This is mostly a personal preference with one gauge. What do my fish prefer? And then after that, mostly you can do what you want. Just be very cautious if you're selecting anything that it's not altering the pH unless you specifically need it to. But based off the advice I gave you in the first video, you shouldn't be fighting your natural water parameters out of the tap. You know, you should be helping you narrow down your list of species based off of what's coming out of your tap conditions to help you not have to add a bunch of chemicals and get super technical with your first tanks. So that's the video, guys. So I'll see you in the next video. Like I said, please feel free to comment below any questions, concerns you have. Give this video a like if you haven't done so already. Click subscribe and hit the bell notification icon, and I'll get that third video out to you real soon. All right, take care.